Today, we're going to get into the life of someone who was, well, a true global icon, but also a really complex, deeply human person. We're talking about a hero who literally ran away from his own destiny, a powerful warrior who valued peace above all else, and the savior of the world who, believe it or not, had a tough time connecting with his own family. This is the incredible life of Avatar Aang.
All right, so before we can really talk about Aang, we've got to understand what he was born into. See, the Avatar isn't just some super powerful bender. They are the living, breathing bridge between our world and the spirit world. The only person who can master all four elements: air, water, earth, and fire. And their job? Oh, just to keep the entire world in balance. No pressure, right?
And that right there is where this whole story really kicks off. Because carrying the weight of the world is a heavy, heavy burden for anyone, let alone a fun-loving kid who suddenly wakes up 100 years in the future, smack dab in the middle of a global catastrophe.
To really get Aang, you first have to understand the world he was born into, and then the totally different, war-torn world he woke up to a century later.
So, let's set the scene. Right before Aang's time, the world was on a razor's edge. The leader of the Fire Nation, Fire Lord Sozin, decided it was time to expand his empire. He launched a massive world war, all under the banner of sharing his nation's prosperity, whether the rest of the world wanted it or not.
Now, Sozin was smart. He knew how the Avatar cycle worked. He knew the next one had to be an air nomad. So in this absolutely horrific, calculated move, he used the power of a comet to amplify his nation's power and launched a surprise attack. He committed genocide, wiping the air nomads completely off the map. This wasn't just the start of a war, it was the tragic backdrop for Aang's entire life.
And what about Aang? Well, he was just a kid. Can you imagine being told at 12 years old that you're the Avatar? The pressure, the responsibility, finding out they were going to send him away from his mentor, it was all just too much. So he did what any scared kid might do. He ran. He jumped on his best friend, his sky bison Appa, and they took off. But they flew right into a massive storm, and in a moment of pure survival, his avatar state kicked in and encased them both in a giant iceberg. And there they stayed, just frozen in time for a whole century.
So for 100 years, the world was on its own, no Avatar. But that long silence was finally about to be broken. Aang's reawakening wasn't just the start of his journey, it was the start of a legend.
He's eventually found by a brother and sister from the Southern Water Tribe, Katara and Sokka. And it's with them that he starts to put the horrifying puzzle together. The war had been raging for 100 years, and he was the last Airbender. And that's the moment the runaway kid starts to become a hero. He accepts his duty, he forms Team Avatar with his new friends, and later they're joined by the amazing blind earthbender, Toph Beifong. And the whole time, they're being hunted by the obsessed exiled prince of the Fire Nation, Zuko.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's that huge turning point. The fun-loving kid is still in there, for sure, but now he's got this powerful sense of purpose. He finally understands that who he is tied to the fate of the entire world.
So, Aang's quest to master water, earth, and fire is all leading up to this one, final, ultimate test. He's about to face a challenge that won't just test his power, but the very core of who he is and what he believes. Okay, this is where Aang's story becomes truly one of a kind. He's facing this impossible choice. On one hand, he's a monk, raised to believe that all life is sacred. On the other, he has to stop this unstoppable tyrant, Fire Lord Ozai. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is telling him he has to end Ozai's life. But Aang? He finds another way. He connects with this ancient, almost forgotten wisdom and finds a third option. Instead of taking Ozai's life, he takes his bending, his power, away forever.
I mean, what a revolutionary move. He won the war, not just by being more powerful, but by being spiritually stronger. He ended a century of pain and fighting, but he did it on his own terms. He brought balance back to a world that had been broken for way too long.
But the end of the war wasn't the end of Aang's story, not by a long shot. You could argue his biggest challenges were still ahead. Now he had to go from being a warrior to a world leader and build a peace that would actually last.
So Aang's adult life was all about building a new world from the ashes of the old one. Right away, he starts working with his former enemy, now Fire Lord Zuko, to heal the world. And that partnership leads to probably his greatest political achievement, the founding of the United Republic of Nations, a brand new society where people from all nations could live together. And its capital, Republic City, became this amazing symbol of progress.
Later in his life, he focused on rebuilding his lost culture by creating the Air Acolytes. So for the next 70 years, the world saw this period of incredible change. It was an era guided by Aang's vision, with new technology and a new kind of cooperation between nations. He really did set the stage for the next generation and for the world his successor, Avatar Korra, would inherit.
And his legacy wasn't just political. I mean, think about it. He was the last Airbender. The weight of an entire culture was on his shoulders. To make sure it didn't just vanish with him, he created the Air Acolytes. These were non-benders who totally devoted themselves to learning the spiritual ways of the air nomads, basically becoming the keepers of a culture that had almost been completely destroyed. But here's the thing about legends. Behind the myth, there's always a person. And when we look a little closer at Aang's adult life, we find a much more complicated and honestly, a much more human story.
And this is where we really see the man behind the legend. As a father to his 3 children with Katara, Aang had his flaws. That immense burden of being the last of his kind meant he poured almost all of his attention into his only airbending son, Tenzin. And that left his other 2 kids, Kaya and Bumi, feeling overshadowed and, a lot of the time, kind of neglected. It's a really tough but important reminder that even the world's greatest heroes have personal blind spots and struggles.
And maybe that intense focus on his legacy was because, deep down, he knew his time was running out. He passed away at the biological age of 66, which, for an Avatar, is actually quite young.
And the reason why is just this incredible, tragic irony. The very thing that saved his life, and in turn saved the world, being frozen in the Avatar state for 100 years, is what ultimately shortened his life. All that energy used to preserve him in the iceberg just caught up to him in the end.
So when you look at the whole picture, what do you see? Aang was a reluctant kid who became a global savior. He was a powerful warrior who never gave up his pacifist soul, a statesman who literally built a new world, and a father who buckled under the weight of his own legacy. He wasn't perfect. Of course he wasn't. But his life proves that a hero's journey isn't about being flawless. It's about having the courage to face impossible burdens and somehow leaving the world a little more balanced than you found it.